Hi everybody, welcome again to another episode of Fish Keeping Jamaica. My name is Raleigh. I deal with ornamental fish keeping, fish care, breeding, keeping, and trading. Right, I'm presently in New York, right, and I am looking at harvesting snow as a means of, you know, fish safe water to, for your aquarium. All right, so we live in a world where in which we have what you call climate change. We live in a world where in which the commodity of water seems to be on the decline as far as fresh water, fresh clean water is concerned. Persons will refer to it as potable water. All right, so it's kind of like getting a little bit cold. So for this share, I'm going to go inside and then I am going to finish up this. Wow, it's really cool, guys. Then I'm gonna be finishing up this conversation. All right, so the space is much a little bit cooler on this side of residence where I'm at. Okay, so let's continue the conversation. Although we just practically started. All right, so we live in a world where in which we have the melting of the ice caps in the North Pole, and the South Pole also showing some amount of melting. We live in a space where in which, and when I say we, I mean the entire world, we live in a space where in which the sea level is actually rising, and we are impacted heavily by several climatic conditions such as extreme weather conditions. My country, Jamaica, experienced a Category 5 hurricane, first in its history, just recently. It suffered a lot of damage, especially on the western end. I saw where in which persons. So I have actually seen where in which a 3-story house have actually been flooded in Jamaica. When I say 3-story, I mean 3-story, and normally a story is between 10 to 12 feet, the minimum. So an average of about nearly 20 feet worth of water, volume of water, actually flooded a particular community, and the persons were practically beckoning for help. There is no record in history that says that this actually happened before. All right, so we're talking about water harvesting and snow harvesting. Now in Jamaica, especially in the rural communities, it is practiced that you would have a sheet of zinc or a canal or a large piping that goes around the entire house, and it collects the rainfall as it falls, and it channels it within to a drum or a large container that stores the water. Right, a typical issue that surrounds this whole cycle is that the drum that holds the water tend to have problems with mosquito breeding, right? So persons have their way of actually preserving the water, ensuring that the mosquitoes are not able to go in the container, such as placing a little mesh on the top of the container, so as the water flows from the house top, it will go on top of the mesh, and whatever bramble or trash or whatever that is on the house top, it will not go into the water, and the mosquito itself will not be able to go into the water to lay its egg. All right, so cool. And this is normally practiced within the rural communities, and the rural communities are normally a little bit distant. When I say a little bit distant, I mean several miles away from the city, from the industrial spaces. You have communities such as in Clarendon and in Manchester that do a little bit of water harvesting because they do have water issue. However, there is a problem of mining, right? And bauxite company use some chemicals that the fumes goes up into the atmosphere, and as the rain fall, it mixes with those fumes and those gases, and the all that falls down to the surface, and we get what you call acid rain, or polluted water. Now, being in New York, it's typically the same, right? Snow is another form of precipitation. You have different types of precipitation. You have snow, hail, sleet, fog, mist, rainfall. right? And probably I can list a little bit more, but this is not a geography class, right? Okay, so what if I would get some of the snow that is outdoor, place it within a space where which it melts, and use that water as it melts and become to the temperature in which you want for your aquarium, and you replace your aquarium fish water with the melted ice. That's a really cool thing to do, right, guys? But here's the problem. um, where I'm living in New York, right? Right now, I'm at New York right now, right, guys? Is that you have industrial pollution within the air. So if you should uh, measure between Jamaica water harvesting versus snow harvesting in the United States of America, New York in particular, you'll realize that you have greater levels of pollutant in the air than in New York, that is, than in, let's say, rural sections of Jamaica. However, one must be mindful that even in the rural section of Jamaica where rain do fall, you have the propensity of the rainfall still becoming polluted, because as we all know, as the wind blow, it blows the clouds which contains the sacks of water, which eventually when burst you'll get rainfall, and it can blow the sacks of clouds from one space to the next. So therefore, evaporation process can occur within the town, the industrial areas, and that cloud is blown to a different space, and eventually that cloud bursts, rainfall do occur, and person would say that the water is good to drink because the place is, the space is mostly vegetation, So I'm coming back to the Jamaica situation. I explained what is meant by precipitation, right? Precipitation is, if you did not get it straight, let me explain it again. Precipitation is a process by which moisture, or should I say water, in form of mist, hail, rainfall, snow, etc. Right? So it is just a form of water, right? What happens is that this thing what they call pollution exists practically everywhere in the world today, and as a result of pollution, you have the melting of the ice caps due to the ozone layer becoming more endangered, should I say. It's the hole within the ozone layer throughout the entire world, different spaces, especially over the west, as a result of industrialization and dangerous gases going up into the atmosphere, eating out at the ozone layer, due to the burning of fossil fuel and other noxious gases. You find that the ozone layer is now becoming depleted. So the rays of the sun that was shielded by the ozone layer, right, from the earth, it's now finding its way on the earth itself, on the earth's surface itself. So as a result of that, we have what you call global warming, and as a result of global warming, what's happening is that the ice, the areas that are normally with ice experiencing very cool temperature, 365 or 366 days for the year, are now melting, and as a result, all that ice cap, that ice that was within that space, is being melted, and it's adding to the volume of water that exists within the sea and the oceans. As a result of that, you have ocean level rising, and so countries that have low shorelines are currently experiencing their shorelines being gradually eaten away as a result of this rising tides, this rising sea level, right? The example of that can be seen in Jamaica along the Hellshore space, which I remember when I was a boy learning to swim, I could walk out into the Hellshore beach, and very, very far, I mean like probably about 600, 700 yards out into the shores, and the water would be like at my knee. Right, today you can just make one step from sections of the coastline, and the water reaches up to your waistline or even higher, depending on how short you are, right? And I'm telling you, during this time, during the 80s, it was fun just swimming in the shallow water because you could do a lot of things there. Now it's getting more dangerous as a result of global warming and ice cap melting, sea level rising, the shoreline kind of being eaten out by the rising tides and sea level. So you find that a lot of properties that are existing along the shoreline are now being eroded, non-existent as a result of that. How does this play a role in the whole idea of precipitation and water harvesting and snow harvesting? I'm talking about the whole idea of pollution and the dangers of using rainwater and snowfall and any other type of precipitation in its natural state so as to facilitate domestic use, including aquarium maintenance and commercial use for usage within the space, right? It is very dangerous because you have acid rain, and whilst you might not have acid rain, you might have chemicals mixing in the atmosphere with the water, with the moisture that is coming down, and it is harvested into the barrel or into the container, as I shared with you before, that covers around the house top, channeled into the barrel. It is not treated, and the water is used in the barrel as is, without any addition of anything that will purify the water further to ensure that it is safe for human consumption. Now picture this, the western hemisphere, or should I say the western space. You have east and west, which has sections of the Caribbean, North America, Central America, and I would say part of South America is being affected greatly as a result of the global warming issue and pollution. Well, pollution results in global warming, right? In the sense that a lot of industries have shipped their business to certain spaces, in which I won't say any name or whatever, right? But ship their business in certain spaces, right? A lot of production are taking place in spaces where dangerous gas and fumes are rising to a level where which it is causing damage on our ozone layer, which leads to the ozone layer being depleted. Holes are being formed in it, according to scientific research, and as a result the rays of the sun are coming through, and it's causing an issue. There has been rise in skin cancer and other ailments as a result of this. All right, so collecting the snow as it falls is considered to be dangerous, because what happened is that the snow, the precipitation as it falls, for those persons not familiar with precipitation within the atmosphere, precipitation changes with height. So moisture normally not moisture comes is stored within the clouds, right? So as the clouds become filled with moisture, you call it saturation. When it reaches saturation level, it collapses. As the moisture exits the sack, or the cloud sack, what happens is that moisture is transformed at time from water, in which we call rainfall, to ice, in which we call hail, snow. All of that happen coming down, and the temperature within within the atmosphere will determine the type of precipitation a space actually receive. Now, being it that currently the United States is within a space that is in a higher altitude than, let's say, the Caribbean, you find that the precipitation of the precipitation type of snow is a familiar occurrence within this space. So before the snow actually melts, it hits the ground. Now for the Caribbean is more closer to the equator. And so as the water transform from rainfall to hail to snow, it all of that as it reaches near the Caribbean space, the temperature is so great that it actually transform it back um, to, to rainfall, and the rain will actually fall within that space. There are sections in Jamaica, such as in Mandeville, Manchester, which experiences what you refer to as hail, and these hails are like large rock type of ice that falls from the sky, and sometimes these large rock type of ice formation, right? Yes, ice actually creates damage. It depends on the temperature, because this area, Manchester Mandeville, and in some sections of in the Blue Mountain, they do experience this, right? So the large rocks, plumes of ice, just falls, and you call that hail, right? Now, if we were a little bit higher, we would not get hail. Probably we get snow. But because we are so close to the equator, what you find is that it's either hail or rainfall we experience. So what happened is that with the gases going up from the industrialized spaces, such as in New York and other industrial cities or towns in throughout the world, or in New York, right? In New York, right? What happened is that the precipitation, the moisture, mixes with the fumes of gases that exist within the space, and it creates a mixture of something that is not fit for human consumption, is not fit for our environment, is not healthy, right? So it would be unwise for you to as soon as the snow starts to fall, for you to be opening your mouth and tasting the snow, because it's polluted, right? Some people do it, but this is not healthy. I heard a presenter on a program just recently, when I had planned to do a feature on this, a discussion on this, and I heard the presenter said that if you're planning to consume snow, do not consume the snow when it just starts. You consume it probably in the middle, because at that time most of the pollutants would have already been mixed with the snow that is in the air, and it would be already falling to the ground, right? So you can get what I'm getting at, that there are some true facts really what I'm saying, right, guys? All right, so for me personally, I still cannot understand in Jamaica, why is it that persons do use rainwater without treatment. I remember one time I went to a house somewhere in, I think it's in Manchester. The house was situated on like something like a rock, and it was like probably half mile up into the mountains, probably 1 mile up into the mountains. It's very far up, right? They never had any pipe water, and I don't think they had any light, right? However, they had a system set up where the rainfall was harvested within a drum, and periodically they would fill another drum that exists within the house. Now the drum outside did not have any mosquitoes in it, but the drum inside had, right? Because the drum outside, they had the mesh over the drum, and then the water will come off the house top, exit the house top through the mesh and go into the drum, and then they will, piecemeally take up some, carry into the drum inside. And guys, we went and we were offered juice, and we drank, and I was wondering, where is the water? They said that they don't have any running water. So when I looked into the drum, right, I saw some mosquito guys, right? Yeah, you laugh at me, right? I saw some mosquitoes. The mosquitoes were a lot, right? And just the sight of the mosquitoes alone, I used the bathroom on a regular occasion coming home, and I was a driver, so you know that I had to stop a lot, right? So it's not healthy to have water just like that being used, whether it is for your fish or whether it is for your personal consumption. Because what happened is that the untreated water, um, when given to your pet, such as your dog, your cat, your fish, whatever you have, right, it will cause health problems. The fish can experience elevated pH levels. It can experience pollution to the extent in which they suffer disease such as fin rot. They can suffer the whole idea of the eyes being bulgy. A lot of issues can occur as a result of you using water that is garnered, that is that you get from rainfall or from snow. So for me, the whole idea of harvesting water for rainfall, from harvesting water from rainfall, I would be cautious with that. For me, whenever I do have my ponds outside and they are going to be, I put them outside so as to, well, I fill up the containers with water outside. I put a mesh over it, right, for two things. One, I do not want any frogs to go in, and two, I do not want any mosquitoes to go in. So yeah, because mosquitoes, although the fish will eat the mosquitoes, but the mosquitoes will end up leave and come and cause me a problem, right? So I'm cautious that way, right? I whilst the whole idea of harvesting water seems to be an issue or a task wherein it is considered as free water because you don't have to pay for it. It comes from the heavens, right? One must understand that there's a cost, and the cost is health, right? So for me right now, the whole idea of harvesting snow, whilst it seems like a good idea, I would say that it's not, because there are a lot of pollutants within the atmosphere, and these pollutants will, the thing about germs and pollutants, guys, is that germs and pollutants can sit within a space for several years or hours, right, before it is gradually, it distinguish, or it no longer exists. And so one might say that the pollutant might be neutralized with the coolness of the precipitation of the snow. That's not necessarily so, because when you actually place let's say place certain things within the fridge, it keeps, right, and then when you take it out and it becomes at room temperature, you find that things start to change, whether it's the meat, the meat, after a while you take it out of the fridge, it's not smelling, right, guys? A chicken or a fish or whatever, it's not really smelling because it's frozen. When it becomes melted, room temperature, soft and all that, you can smell the freshness of the chicken or the chicken or the fish, right? So same too with pollutants. Only thing that happen whenever snow falls or hail or whatever means of precipitation that occur, is that it's like it is put to sleep for a bit, and whenever it melts, right, the problem exists because it's now alive and awaiting a host so as to cause an issue. So my thing is water harvesting in rural areas, whilst it might be considered as a rural area because rural area free from industrial pollution, it's not necessarily true, because The higher you go is the stronger the winds are, and the stronger the winds are, the more propensity it is for the winds to be carrying clouds with it. So therefore a cloud can be carried from miles, right? So I'm in New York. A cloud can be carried from as far back as New York to Canada, right? So it depends on the wind, and with the cloud comes the different components that exist within the atmosphere, and as a result of that, what you find that the pollutants do travel with the cloud, and whenever the cloud becomes saturated, collapse, rainfall do start. You find that the whatever pollutants is within that space, it mixes with the water, it falls to the surface, and if you do harvest that water, you have a high probability of getting ill, right? If you use that water as is. Now there is a machine, or should I say a process, that is used by some countries to get fresh water from salt water, where the water is salt water, seawater. It enters from one end, and you separate the salt from the water itself, and it becomes fresh water, right? That's the space in which we are living in now. However, this does not negate the fact that pollution still occurs within our oceans and our seas. Now Jamaica has Jamaica Kingston Harbor, right, is considered the seventh largest natural harbor in the world. However, so being the seventh largest natural harbor in the world, Jamaica is within the top 10 spaces. That is awesome, right? However, in Jamaica, I think it's in the top 5 most polluted harbor in the world category, right? Because most of our surface water runs directly without being treated within the Kingston Harbor. And Kingston Harbor is an extensive space, right? It stretches from I might be corrected on this, but it stretches from as far back as somewhere near airport road right there, so coming straight around all the way back to Hunts Bay, going straight around. So it is a very extensive place, and it is a natural harbor. When I say harbor, I mean it's a space where which a ship are naturally able to dock without much action being required by engineers to chisel out sections of the coastal area, so that the ship with the extensive lower end will be able to maneuver there. I've always shared with my students that if you see a ship and the ship is measuring 10 inches in height from the sea level up into the sky, calculate that the ship is practically the same height in the water going the other way, right? So you can imagine what I'm saying as far as ports, as far as taking in goods and shipping out goods. The harbor plays an important role in a country's development, right? All right, so the whole idea of harvesting snow seems practical because it's natural water, right? It comes from the skies, and it is something that you don't have to worry about whether or not I should use what you call water conditioner or stress coat, because the water should be natural, right? Just like a river channel, right? I shared this with my students once, and they looked at me in awe. So you're traveling, right, guys? You're traveling, let's say within a 100-mile stretch, and before you start to travel, you drank a lot of water, right? And in traveling, you have it's not a big, a large group, but just a relatively small group. You want to urinate, and so you would actually ask, or you would actually stop if you're the person driving, and you would urinate, right? And there's a possibility that probably you might urinate 1 or 2 or 3 times going home. Picture this: an animal actually defecate anywhere. Well, I'm speaking from a Jamaican perspective. So a dog would actually defecate anywhere he's able to, right? Same too with other wild animals, and they will also urinate anywhere, right? But after an average of about 3 to 4 days, that waste that the animal pass out will become dried out. It will no longer have any it will not have much liquid within it, and chances are you might even pass it and not even remember that is animal waste, because it's all dried. And I said to my students once, suppose should you imagine all that moisture that came from the waste of the animal, or even in extreme condition, you're coming from a country and you have to urinate, or even do a number two in the bush, all of that is dried up after a while, right? Where do you think all that moisture goes? It goes up into the atmosphere, right? And after a while it contributes to the precipitation that falls down on the earth's surface. And the whole idea of the water cycle, it continues, right? If we should think overthink too much as to how things operate or how things occur as how they do, we will be a set of people who just would not want to consume, or just would not want to act based on the probability that exists out there that we might be consuming something that is regarded as hazardous for our health. I also shared with my students at one point in time, right, guys? I'll be finishing with this podcast very, very, very shortly. That you have 100 acres of cabbage in a field, flat field. You have your little caddy, or your little vehicle in which you drive, because you're the owner, you're the manager or the supervisor, and you drive and you supervise. Now you're in the middle of the field with a worker and you're looking at something, but early in the morning you ate something and it starts to upset your stomach, and you really want to do a number two. The bathroom from where you're at is roughly about probably about 10 or 15 acres north of where you're at, right? And you're feeling as if you would want to mess up yourself. What would you do? Would you jump into the caddy or a little ride so as to go to the bathroom, the restroom, or would you just beckon to the worker that you're gonna do what you do over in the bushes near, well, in the field, because the entire space is planted with cabbage, right? And then you would probably do something right there, right? And they always say that that sounds gross, right? But these are certain things that we should consider as far as the natural way of life, and this do occur, guys. For me, I would add my little contribution to the field, and I would probably tuck in probably 2 or 3 cabbage heads within that space, and I can tell you that those cabbage heads would probably do really awesome there, right, guys? Yeah. So the thing is, we live in a world in which we can contribute to the wholeness, or should I say the healthy space, and there are certain things that we can't prevent, because nature within itself provides a mechanism by which it purifies it, because the moisture from the waste of the animal, or even you, whilst it's on the ground, is evaporated up into the atmosphere. The evaporation process, just like when you boil water, right, and the water becomes purified, the evaporation process purifies the moisture that comes from the waste, and as it rises upward, it now becomes condensed, and it contributes to the sack of moisture that exists within the cloud. Now, this water within itself, given that the entire space in which the cloud has been formed is, a clean air, this water is good for drinking, for consumption, right? However, spaces like in New York, or in some industrial spaces within Japan or in China, right, they do experience issues as far as not being able to consume the rainwater as is, because they are heavily industrialized, and if you should consume the water, even the well water that exists underground, it's not considered to be safe in many jurisdictions, in many spaces, because persons do water their grass, right, and as they water the grass, they realize that the grass is not really looking all that beautiful, so they go to the garden store and they get a lot of chemicals and they spray it on the grass, and the grass now starts to look good, and you say, okay, this works. Now, as it works, you put more chemicals, and all that chemical is washed down into the soil, and it goes into the reservoir, or it goes down into the well, or it goes down into the waterways that is beneath that exists beneath the surface, and eventually it pollutes the domestic along with the commercial water supply. And what happened next, persons tend to experience health issues, right, whilst a lot of persons are not really keen on the advice of being cautious as to what you drink, where you drink, how you drink, or you consume stuff. It's important, if you do want a healthful life, or a life where you don't experience excruciating pain or illness that is really, 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 really bad, and expensive to manage, right? Now, this is a lot to swallow. I'm going to be doing more pieces like this, so as to get my audience to understand that being out there is a lot to be garnered, right? It's a lot of information to be shared, right? And a lot of persons are so sheltered within their space that they believe that their space is the only space that exists, and that everything else that exists is just a farce, or it's just AI or social media trying to get clicks. But in truth and in fact, there's a lot of information about our health, and there's a lot of information about what we can do so as to preserve our health, and not only our health, but the pets that we have within our care, their health, and in turn, we have a happy space to survive. Thank you very much for listening to my mumble jumble throughout the entire piece. I appreciate it. This is really for another episode, right? Remember, fish keeping Jamaica, an adventure. I'm going to be having podcasts, and some of my podcasts going to be including my son, in which I speak to different social ills and that exists out there. I'm not going to be creating a different YouTube channel so as to put the podcast out. Once you see a certain amount of minutes for my share, you know that that's a podcast, and you'll see the title podcast, and it's something that I want you to consider. Where do you stand as far as your environmental conservation methods? that you use so as to ensure that we live not only for today but also for tomorrow. Peace out. Bless you. Bye bye.